Hi, everyone. This is Carl Gould with another episode of the Carl Gould Collective, where we bring you the top CEO minds and subject matter experts to help you accelerate your learning curve and grow your businesses. Today, we're really lucky. We have Riggs Eckelberry. He's the founder and CEO of the innovative water technology company OriginClear, and he's disrupting the industry and delivering water solutions for industrial customers worldwide. So welcome to the show, Riggs.
Carl, it's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So there's a lot of places to start in your career, but there's no, I don't think, natural jump to water. So take me through a little bit of what got you to the place where you said, I want to disrupt and I want to improve and innovate the water industry.
So we're not starting where I was an 8-pound baby.
No, don't need that one. I'm sure you're 8 pounds, and then let me guess. Right after that, you were 9, right? And then take us through 10 pounds, right?
Right.
So let's jump right into it, and your resume will unfold, I'm sure, as we go.
Well, thank you. My jump into water was an odd and strange one because I was a tech guy. In the 80s. I had a tech company in New York City. By the way, a major learning experience where I learned so many lessons that had, one of the many. But then in the 90s, of course, the dot-com was amazing. I loved it, had some good exits. And then in the early 2000s, I was helping a company go onto the NASDAQ, software company, in the security space. And I was the number 2, doing the road shows in New York City, all that good stuff. And I just felt that, what number 2 doesn't think there can be a better number 1? I reached out to a fund that I knew, and I said, I think I can be a CEO. And they said, yeah, actually, but we're not doing tech anymore. That's passé. And it's ironic because literally tech had its biggest jump after that with Facebook and so forth. But nonetheless, they had decided to go green. And they said, what we want to do is algae for biofuels. And so I'm like, right. Okay. And weirdly enough, I have a brother, super inventor brother. He's very sort of the back to the future kind of guy. And he had a patent that could be used to grow algae. Anyway, long story short, we started a company. It was called Origin Oil because algae was the original oil. And it was a great run. I mean, I had all this media attention because who knew? It's kind of wild. And it was very much in vogue at the time. And crude oil was at $120 a barrel. So it was doable. Then along came fracking. And all of a sudden, within a couple of years, algae became a science experiment because crude was below $50. And as a result, we had to do something. And I've learned in the 80s, I kind of gave up and gave away my company to my top salesman. I was done with giving up. And so basically, it's easier to pivot than to give up. So that's what we did. And we found an application of our algae extraction technology to extract sewage from water. And boom, we were in the water industry. And immediately we became completely invisible to the media. Boom. Because water is taken for granted. It's like a road. You only notice it when there's a pothole. Otherwise, it's a road. What's the big deal? Yeah. But the problem is that there's a tremendous amount of potholes in the water industry. We have a big problem with the infrastructure, not because the people aren't great, but they're totally underfunded by about $100 billion.
What are the problems? What are our infrastructure problems with water?
Well, it's very simple. We had a infrastructure boom, the Hoover Dam, the New York's Delaware water system, all kinds of aqueducts. Everything was built in the first part of the 20th century. And then it petered out. And I think, again, because politicians respond to what the voters care about, and voters took water for granted, and the funding for water went downhill from there. And it also became harder and harder to build centralized systems in populated. I mean, Pinellas County is one of the most built-up counties in Florida. Where are you going to put a sewage plant, and who would agree to it? And it takes 20 years. So it became impossible to really think of, it's like, are you going to build another Hoover Dam? Not going to happen. It was okay back then because people would die almost every single day. They'd fall into the cofferdam and then they'd keep pouring the concrete. I don't think we do that anymore. So the era of big central works fell behind, but what replaces it? And so when we got into it at first, we were just pure technology. We had a technology solution. And what we ran into was a technology, water industry is technology phobic. because again, what they do is fine. They're kind of trying to hold it still and not change anything, sometimes for good reasons like public health, but nonetheless, it's very, very static technology-wise. And in 2016, soon after we purchased our Texas company, which is doing fantastically, I came across a piece of research from Lux Research that basically said decentralized water is the thing. Unburden the system. The system is not being funded. It's not going to be funded anytime soon. I mean, do you realize that the Biden $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, the water portion of it was 1/2000th of it?
No kidding.
Nothing. It was $55 billion. So
is essentially what you're saying is we're not going to see any big Hoover dams. There's not going to be any more Lake Meads happening, so by decentralization, what does that entail?
Okay, the first thing you need to realize is what overburdens our infrastructure is the fact that 90% of water demand is by industry and agriculture. Only 10% is residential.
I've read that the cows use more water than people in America.
100%, much more, because agriculture and industry in America is about 50-50 of that 90%. Now, if you go to Somalia, it's 90% agriculture, but in America, it's about half-half. And so it's about 4 times as much as people, therefore, and there's no easy fix. But what does make sense is if you have an overburn, if there's too many people riding a horse, get the second person off the horse, right?
Right.
That's the easy thing. You don't get a stronger horse. So that's the easy thing, is like get off the horse. And so we got into the business of getting industry and agriculture off of the grid. And it turns out it's beneficial. They like it. Here's why. Because of all these problems with infrastructure, they are being harassed by the municipalities. We can't take your water, truck it to another county, blah, blah, blah. And water rates skyrocketing. You've seen the graphs recently. What's the highest inflating things in America? There's 2 things: hospital services and college tuition, right?
Right.
Water is inflating as fast as college tuition.
No kidding.
But it's not on the graphs. It's not showing up. Again, I don't know why, but
no one's talking about it necessarily. Yeah.
There's real pain. And people are defaulting on their water bills. And now you got to go get bottled water. That's even worse, right? And the utilities can't charge enough, but they're still trying. So businesses get, okay, you know what? If I go off the grid, have my own system, then I'll control my costs. I'll be able to recycle, which I'm not doing right now. And that way I'll get more turns out of the water I'm paying for. And I'll have less hassle from the central government. It's a win-win. And the municipalities are like, great. They're happy. They're not fighting it like the energy companies are fighting solar, right? So they're like, okay, love it. Go for it. Do your thing. And so we have a boom, both at the very high level. For example, PepsiCo recently committed to 80% recycling of their water. Well, to do that, you have to treat your own processed water. You can't send it to the city. So at the high end, it's happening big time. But also where the big revolution, I believe, is in the small to middle, which is far more numerous. And, breweries, housing developments, car dealerships, freeway rest stops, RV campgrounds, mobile home parks, you name it. Anybody who has to go off the grid is doing it. And so what we dealt with in the recent years and right now is the people who have to, they're forced to. They're in the middle of nowhere, they got to connect. For example, we're experiencing in northern Texas a land boom between Dallas and the Oklahoma border. It's racing ahead of sewage capabilities. So we're installing these cool drop-in-place containers. It's literally like one of those self-storage containers that you see on it's people's driveways. That's it. Boop, dropped in, it's done, and it processes the water.
So that's like a portable sewage system?
Exactly. Containerized, modular.
When it processes it, does it become potable water or is it non-potable water?
Well, whatever you want. Typically, it gets more and more expensive the more potable it gets. So typically it goes to a level of what's called gray water, where you can use it for irrigation. You can recharge the aquifer, except in really, really, really water-stressed areas, you don't need the potable water. It's too expensive. So typically it's for reuse in non-potable areas, which is plenty. A brewery can reuse 50% of its water for non-potable purposes, So that's plenty because it takes 7 to 8 liters of water to make a liter of beer. Well, now you just cut that in half. Well, actually by about 25% if you do the math. Well, that's a couple of liters, and that helps. And they do it more than once and that kind of stuff. So it's beneficial. They like it. Everybody's in favor of it. But now we're looking ahead to not the people who are forced to. That's our current. We're doubling or tripling our business every year. It's going great. But those are the people that have to. The next phase is going to be people who decide to do it strategically. They don't have to do it, but they decide to do it. For them, the big barrier is capital. Who has a budget? You're a brewery. Do you have $1 million set aside for your water treatment system? No, it's not your business. So during the pandemic is when we really started getting creative about this. It was in February of 2020 when nobody really knew what was going to happen next, but we knew there was a big deal. When Wuhan shut down for a month, we knew there's a big deal coming, and we figured capital was going to be an issue. Now, we didn't realize that $14 trillion was going to be floated out there, but still, even to this day, people need our help with capital. And so we decided to do something called water on demand, which is water as a service. You want water treatment? Sign here, 15-year service contract. The machine that goes on site, that container, is ours. We maintain it. You pay on the meter like you're used to with the city. It's no change of paradigm, and it's seamless.
You're still paying a water and a sewer bill.
Exactly. So everybody's happy, and that is the new trend. So first part was the two challenges. The first challenge was shrinking the water systems from these big, hole in the ground type systems that people are accustomed to that container or even that 200 square foot unit in the corner of the brewery, whatever. So shrinking it down, and we built a company called Modular Water Systems, which is kicking it. And then we got into this modular water, and the model there is to approximate the oil well model, which is master limited partnerships, which generate royalties. And now regular investors can invest in water systems for the first time in a basket of water systems. And that has not been available until now. People love it. They're excited about it. And it's we call it water like an oil well. And it's cool because you make a lot of money from oil wells, but it's oil. How about water? Isn't that cool? People get excited.
Yeah, very cool. And this, it sounds like this targets the commercial, agricultural, industrial market. You're not necessarily looking to put one of these treatment systems in someone's backyard, because it doesn't sound like residential is the real issue here.
Yeah. First of all, we don't go after the 10%. You want to go for the 90%. That's
sure, of course.
Entrepreneurial rule. Go for the big. You know what the ask Jesse James, where why do you rob banks? It's where the money is. Well, why do we help industry and agriculture? It's where the demand is, right? But secondly, it's very cutthroat. It's very commoditized. There's players in the space already. Fuji Water has a great black water system for homes. I bet they sell 12 a year. Because who recycles black water? I mean, most people use a septic tank or just send it to the city. So we stay away from that, but there's a future in it. Look at just one last thing, and then I want to talk a little bit more about, what interests you in terms of your podcast. But Miami-Dade County, when they first built it, they had no city planning, and they ended up with 100,000 septic tanks within the county limits. And those are now polluting all the aquifer, which is only 2 feet below the freaking septic tank. So, So their solution is, we're going to send a sewage line to each one of those 100,000 places. Oh, that's going to cost $8, $10, $12 billion, 20 years, tear up all the streets. Why not just give a rebate to all these places to convert to a black water system? And that's a solution. We're not pitching Miami-Dade, because one of our big cardinal rules is don't talk to government except to get permits. Otherwise, industry self-help, agriculture self-help.
Right, sure. So that leads me to where I was going to go. What are some of the challenges you have found in, bringing this innovation to the water industry? Because usually, when you disrupt an industry, you're usually disrupting the 800-pound gorilla in every industry. So what challenges have you faced?
This is a very good point. I've been giving a lot of thought to disruption. In fact, I'm planning to start a podcast, Creative Disruption, because I'm so passionate about it. Mark Andreessen recently on Joe Rogan said something very interesting, or was it Matt Taibbi? One of them, he said, Substack cracked the code for writer publishing, right? Crack the code. Now, that's a key term because now that's what you have to do when you want to disrupt. Now, what did we do to crack the code? The first thing was realize what you're doing already is not functioning. That's the first step. So it takes a certain amount of humility to go, what I'm doing. And we spent tons of money and time on this technology approach only to learn that the water industry takes 12 to 15 years to adopt a new technology. And we just didn't have that kind of time. Then I was inspired by that Lux Research webinar, 2016. I was like a man in the wilderness, decentralized water. And people are like, oh, what?
Right, yeah.
In 2018 is when we cracked the code because we hired Dan Early, who'd been doing this in the wilderness for 20 years already. He was a decentralized water guru who'd been doing these nonstop, unheralded, just kind of doing it, plugging away. And he had terrible capital problems, which is why we were able to acquire him. And we built this whole division around him, modular water. And we said, okay, this is it. This is our chance. And his philosophy of mass assembly, of modular containers, super durable materials, everything in a box, and completely turnkey delivered so that a regular non-water expert can maintain it on site. Because decentralized water, you don't want to have a water expert, right? So all these things. Then it took years to grow it. And it finally took off in 2022. It was double of 2021. And now it's double again this year. It's doubling each year. So that when you start doubling each year, that's the lily pond effect. Like, whoop, whoop, whoop. That's really cool. So, and we do believe there's limits to it, which is why we're coming with that capital solution, but he's expanding. So to go back on the process, A, recognition, B, inspiration, and then the resource, to crack the code, to get traction. You got to get traction somehow. And that always involves either technology or expertise. Let's imagine you're doing an Amazon business. Well, you'd better really, really get to know the Amazon business cold, right? Because it's super, super competitive and cluttered. And water's the same way. I mean, there's some big players. We have now elbowed our way into the space, and we're differentiated by being a decentralization pure play, which most other people are not. And secondly, welcoming regular investors, which no one else is doing.